မြင့်ရွာမြင့်လေဆိုတာဒီညာကပြီးသွားမှရွာနှိပ်ကြပါဒီကနေပြီးရှိတဲ့မှန်တယ်မြတ်ကျွန်တော်ပြောနေတောင်မှုပါညာအကုန်လုံးဆွတ်ချပြီးတော့
O objetivo mesmo é reduzir a vulnerabilidade da comunidade. Essa é a nossa missão.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Martin Atkin. I'm the moderator for this COP26 side event organised by the EU's Climate Change Programme, Global Climate Change Alliance Plus, GCCA Plus, co-organised with UNEP, ICRAF and GNDR. Thank you very much for joining us. Whether you're in Glasgow or Brussels or indeed anywhere else in the world, you're very welcome. We've got an extremely packed agenda for this session, so I'm going to move straight on. But before we start, we want this session to be as interactive as possible. So we'll be using the Slido tool, both for online polls and for you to ask questions, which we will answer towards the end of the session. So if you already have the Slido app on your phone, you can use that. But don't worry if you haven't, because you can also click on the Slido icon at the bottom left of your swap card under session information, and it'll take you straight there. I hope that's clear, and I hope that you are able to use the technology to join us. So now we're going to launch the very first of the polls, and we would like to know, in your opinion, in which areas do nature-based solutions have the most potential? You should see the poll very shortly when you click on the link. So just to repeat, the first poll asks, tell us, in your opinion, in which areas do nature-based solutions have the most potential? Now, while you're answering that poll, GCCA has, of course, implemented many projects and programs which make use of nature-based solutions around the world since it first started in 2007. But now it seems that nature-based solutions are growing in importance. They are being talked about more, and perhaps COP26 is the moment where they really start to get taken more seriously. And over the next hour, we're going to hear from a range of experts who will explore how nature-based solutions can both mitigate climate change and help us adapt to some of the impacts. We'll also hear examples of what nature-based solutions can offer to communities and ecosystems, including environmental, economic and social benefits, and of course how they can help in disaster risk reduction. And we'll look at the opportunities for national and local authorities to use nature-based solutions in the context of their climate actions. The session is split into roughly 3 sections. First of all, the case for nature-based solutions. Secondly, what works in nature-based solutions. And thirdly, what needs to be done to scale up nature-based solutions, and in particular, the financing and policies that are needed in order to do that. First, though, I would like to invite Carla Montesi, the Director of the European Commission, Director General for International Partnerships, that's DG INTPA, most of you probably know it as, and also the Director of the Green Deal and Digital Agenda. And Carla will say a few words by way of introduction. And Carla, maybe you can just tell us a bit about what the EU's position on nature-based solutions is. Thank you.
Many thanks, Martin, and good morning, everyone. Very pleased to join this important panel on this crucial question, why nature-based solutions are a priority, and should be a priority for all of us. Martin, allow me to start with a not so positive note. In the last month, we have seen extreme weather events, all the related disasters, all over the world. The IPCC report says us that this extreme climate episode will be increasingly frequently and overall the planet. This means that they will destroy nature, human-made infrastructure, push more people into poverty, aggravate food insecurity and the conflict, and destabilize economies. And of course, the most vulnerable are, of course, the most affected by all these crises. The IPCC report is clear. This climate change is here to stay. This, of course, underscores what you have already mentioned in your introduction, the importance of adaptation. And you know all the work that the European Union is doing on adaptation. But this calls us also for some mitigation measures. And the good news is that solutions do exist to mitigate the negative impact on climate change. Many of these solutions lie with the rural areas, lie in the way we manage our land and other natural resources. We know that if we restore landscapes and the natural habitat as a forest, of course, these forests can play an important role in the reduction of the emission. If we ensure healthy ecosystem services, we are at the same time answering to the triple crisis: climate change, biodiversity losses, and the pollution. So we need to work with nature more than against it. Allow me also to underline once again that sustainable forest and land management can provide important benefits, both in terms of economic returns that you mentioned and in terms of environment. Now, the European Union clearly supports nature-based solutions. We are committed to promote these approaches. Allow me to say that we have clearly stepped up our approach in all the communication that were made in the Green Deal communication, in the new climate adaptation strategy, in the Farm to Fork, in the 2030 biodiversity strategy. And it's not just about words or general commitment, it's also about action. You have listened our President, Commission President van der Leyen yesterday at the COP. She mentioned, she announced our big pledge of 1 billion dedicated to the Global Forest Finance Pledge. The objective is clear: to help protect, restore, sustainably manage forest. This is a clearly sign of the European Union commitment to lead global change, to protect our planet, of course, in line with the Green Deal ambition. Now, this pledge is coming from our financial instrument, Global Europe, the Neighbourhood Development International Cooperation Instrument, for which we have, our co-legislators have decided to dedicate more than 35% of the budget in the next 6 years to climate change action. This means that we will have to use more than 27 billion euro dedicated to climate and to support our partner countries into the adaptation and the adaptation and the mitigation strategy. Now, of course, we are clear in mind that Europe alone cannot play just alone. We need to build a strong partnership, and this is the reason why we really want a successful COP26 and also an ambitious COP15. Now, we have great challenges in front of us, but as the subject that we have today, we really think that we can tackle these challenges. We have a solution in our hand, and the integrated nature-based approach are clearly a tool to act in face of the climate. Agroecology, allow me to mention just one example, can help to restore and protect ecosystem, ensure food security, and develop the livelihood for the most vulnerable people. So what the EU position is clearly, we really are ready to advocate for natural-based approach in Europe and around the world, and we really intend to use all the instruments that we have from us, from the financial instrument to the policy to the dialogue, to work with our partner countries in stimulating and creating initiative to concretely implement natural-based solution. Many thanks.
Thank you, Carla. And I'm sure we can all agree that we're wishing for a successful COP26, and there's a lot to cover there. So thank you for setting the scene for us. That's great. Now, as I mentioned, we'd like to make this session as interactive as possible. So now we're going to put up the second of our Slido polls. And for this, we'd like you to tell us what, in your opinion, should be the priority for nature-based solutions today. The poll has appeared on Slido now, so that's great. So what do you think should be the priority for nature-based solutions today? And we'll bring you the results of both of those polls later in the session. And don't forget that you can also use Slido to ask questions of any of the speakers, or if you have general questions about nature-based solutions, you can use Slido, and we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the session. Now, of course, it's time to turn to the first section, which is all about the case for nature-based solutions. Why are they so important in the fight against climate change? And I'd like to welcome, first of all, Dr. Lee Winowicki, a soil systems scientist at World Agroforestry, based in Nairobi, Kenya. She also heads up an initiative funded by the EU and IFAD to restore degraded lands in East Africa and the Sahel. Lee, I can see you there. That's great. So over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And today will be talking about building the evidence base for implementing and monitoring nature-based solutions. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see here that this is a map that we've produced and published, and it's available on erosion prevalence. This is one of the most widespread forms of land degradation, soil erosion. And just looking at this map, you can see that it's prevalent. The red hot areas are hot spots of erosion, but also you can see that by generating robust assessments, such as this erosion map, we're able to then target restoration activities by going into the areas that need it most, but also we can use these to track NBS implementation over time. So my next slide highlights what we call the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework. This is a systematic, science-based framework to monitor key indicators of soil and ecosystem health. On the right, you can see the numerous land health indicators that are monitored at georeferenced locations. And the reason for that is that landscape approaches require an understanding of the multiple dimensions. And here, of course, the biophysical dimensions of restoration and nature-based solutions. So kindly allow me to just go to the next slide and show some of the application. So in the bottom left, you can see a map of each of the land degradation surveillance framework sites across Africa. This is a systematic tool that's used across many projects, including EU-funded initiatives. And you can see one of the outputs is creating soil organic carbon maps, for example, for the whole country of Rwanda at a 30-meter resolution. This accuracy allows us then to see how nature-based solutions are increasing carbon in the soil, which we know is a very important tool, a reservoir for climate change mitigation. Now we're coupling this systematic approach with something we're very excited about. This is the Regreening Africa app. This is funded by the EU. Please go to Google Play Store and download this app. And this app is about engaging land users, farmers, extension agents in collecting and tracking restoration data. So in the upper right corner, you can see polygons that farmers, lead farmers and partners have geolocated, and they've recorded what intervention has taken place there. It could be tree planting, it could be farmer managed natural regeneration. And just look at the types of data coming out here. We can look at number of trees planted, 445,000 in Rwanda with 70% survival rate, but also looking at the niches, because remember, farmers will take care of the trees and the soil when they can see the value of this. So in closing, my last slide is just, I hope I've demonstrated to you that integrated landscape approaches provide a key pathway for tackling degradation, addressing climate change, enhancing biodiversity, while also improving food and nutrition security. We do have the tools and methods to measure and track progress, including in huge initiatives such as the Great Green Wall. So with that, thank you so much for the opportunity to present today.
Lee, that's great. Thank you very much. And as Lee said, don't forget to go and download that app, Regreening Africa app, which you can get on all good app stores, I believe. We'll be coming back to Lee later in the session, but now let's move on to our next speaker, who is Karen Sudmeya-Riu. Karen is a senior advisor on disaster risk reduction with the UN Environment's post-conflict disaster management branch in Geneva. And Karen, you're going to talk us through some of the ways that nature-based solutions can boost disaster risk reduction. So thank you, and over to you.
Great. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm extremely honored to be speaking today. And I would also like to thank my colleague Neha Kurian for her contribution to this presentation. If you can go to the my first slide. So we were asked to reflect on why is change needed. So this photo is from Kerala in 2019. Now, just a couple months before, in 2018, there was one of the largest rainfall events that had ever occurred in the state of Kerala. On the 8th of August, over 400 people died, 4.4 million were affected. All 14 districts in Kerala were placed on red alert. Most of the villages across the state were affected, and economic losses were estimated at 2.3 billion US. Now in 2019, on exactly the same day, 8th of August, 120 people were killed and 200,000 affected. And the following year, on the 7th of August, over 70 people were killed. Now this year, in October, one of the most unusual cloudbursts ever to have occurred outside of the monsoon season with twice normal rainfall, and over 40 people, women and men, lost their lives. Climate change, yes, definitely. These were heavy rainfall events, which are very rare and had never before been reported in the Kerala region. So we're witnessing more and more of these extreme rainfall events, not only in Kerala, but around the world. Climate change is definitely one factor, but additionally important, and as we heard from Carla Monseni, is that how we manage our land, our wetlands, our coastlines to enable rainwater to infiltrate into our soils, to reduce erosion, to allow our wetlands to absorb such excess rainfall. So over the past decade, Kerala had experienced massive loss in forest cover, resulting in erosion and conversion of wetlands, which had been diked and drained for development. So we know that change is needed now. So this is why UNEP, with funding from the European Commission, Department of International Partnerships, is developing models for upscaling nature-based solutions into existing development and disaster risk reduction mechanisms. Next slide, please. So one of the large upscaling models that we're working on is through the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guaranteed Act in India, one of the largest development programs in the world. It offers 100 days of guaranteed employment per year to every vulnerable household in need. So in 2020-2021, it employed 6.2 million women and men in Kerala alone, mostly women. And with a total budget of 520 million US, it is a huge program. And this is just one state of India. So it includes natural resource management, promoting livelihoods, assets, with co-benefits for mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So when I come back, I will give more information on exactly what UNEP is doing to promote this work. Thank you. Back over to you.
And we'll be hearing a little bit more about some of that work that's happening in Kerala later in the next section. But now I'd like to move on to the our third expert in this section about the case for nature-based solutions, and that is Shivangi Shavdra, who is the Senior Regional Lead for Asia and Europe at the Global Network of Civil Society Organizations for Disaster Reduction, or GNDR. Shivangi, very welcome to you, and please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all of you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak at this important session. Let me just briefly introduce GNDR, which is a global network of more than 1,600 CSOs across 128 countries, with a vision of building resilience of communities most at risk and reducing impacts on lives and livelihoods of these communities due to disasters and climate change. Next, please. So I'm going to present a case study that what we have done called Views from the Frontline, which was funded by European Union to understand the perspectives of the communities most at risk on threats, barriers, consequences and actions due to disasters and climate change. Globally, 9 conclusions were drawn from this research. The research was conducted from more than 100,000 people across 50 countries. And 2 of the most important conclusions were drawn, which were that the nature of threats are more complex than ever and exacerbated due to impacts of climate change. And the other one, the second one, was underutilization of ecosystems. Both of them are relevant for today's discussion. Next, please. The correlation of both these conclusions can be established by the statistics that you can see on the slide. 60% of the community's members say that the ecosystems-based approach are not used in building resilience in their community. And 52% of the community members report that the ecosystems are not considered for developed plans. In fact, the development plans often lead to degradation or loss of biodiversity, which further attributes to climate-induced disasters such as desertification, water and food insecurity, displacement, etc. Next, please. I would like to finish by presenting a quote from the indigenous community of Chile, which highlights that self-sufficiency of the communities are threatened due to loss of trees, and which has led to land erosion, and thereby there are issues of water and food insecurity in these communities. While the impacts of climate change have led to frequent floodings, extreme heat events, and other ecological imbalances, the failure to consider the nature-based solutions has aggravated these problems further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shivangi, and we'll be hearing more from you later as well. So don't forget that you can post your questions to any of the speakers that we've heard from so far, and indeed the ones that we've got coming up, in the Q&A section on Slido. And actually also in the Q&A section, you'll find a bunch of very useful links to some of the topics we're talking about today, which have already been posted by my colleagues. So please make as much use of Slido as possible. Now, though, we're going to move on to the next area for discussion, and that is what works in nature-based solutions. What examples can we point to around the world where nature-based solutions are already having a positive impact? Now, as we saw in the video at the very beginning of this session, mangroves are possibly one of the most famous examples of how restoring and preserving ecosystems can not only help to protect vulnerable communities from the effects of climate change, but they can also help create sustainable economies, jobs, and livelihoods. But mangroves are, of course, not by no means the only example of nature-based solutions. And here to take us through one such example from Kerala is Karen Sudmaya Riu again, But this time, I think Karen is talking to us via video.
In India, Kerala's coasts are increasingly facing devastating cyclones and rough waves. The damage that is happening to the coast affects the livelihoods and properties of the fishing communities as well as the tourism sector. Most of the coast already has hard structures such as seawalls built on them, which disrupts the natural processes and relationship between the coast and the sea. When these seawalls or some stretches got damaged, the community of Anjadenga, a small island between the backwaters and the sea, searched for a suitable, sustainable and low-cost solution for coastal protection. On the seashore of Kaikara region in Anjadenga, Casuarina trees were planted on a 1 kilometer long strip due to its properties as a fast-growing tree. The project improved the stability of the coast and provided jobs for the local community as they germinated and grew the seedlings themselves.
ശേഷം ഈ കാറ്റ് വന്ന് ഈ കാറ്റാടി പിടിച്ച് നിർത്തും പിന്നെ ഈ വീട് ഒന്നും അടിച്ച് പറത്തിയെടുത്തോണ്ട് പോകില്ല കാറ്റാടിക്ക് വലിയ ഗുണമെല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്.
In the backwaters of Anjadenga, the local body took measures to restore degraded mangroves. Being natural breeding grounds for various species of fish and crustaceans, the mangroves have helped increase fish stock and restore the habitat of migratory birds. The work was funded by the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which provides work for India's most vulnerable women and men. UNEP is collaborating with the Kerala Institute for Local Administration to train key stakeholders for more robust restoration works to enhance resilience of vulnerable communities. Environment-friendly coastal protection using a combination of local indigenous species and traditional knowledge is a futuristic and promising model not just for Anjadenga but for all of Kerala and the world itself. As such, we will be able to strengthen our capacity to diminish the risk coastal areas face.
Some really inspiring work there going on in Kerala. Thank you, Karen. We're going to hear from you again in the next part of the session. But now I'd like to bring in once more Shivangi Chavda of GNDR, who's going to present some of the experiences that she's had implementing nature-based solutions in Sri Lanka. Shivangi?
Yeah, thank you. I'm here to present a case study from GNDR member and views from the Frontline 2019 partner, Jonathan Limited from Sri Lanka, who deployed a cascade tank systems as a nature-based solution for the water stress due to climate change, especially in the drought-prone area. A drought has been identified as one of the major threats by VFL 2019 communities, especially in the Kurunegala district. The livelihoods of these farmers are dependent on rice farming, which is water intensive. Traditionally, these systems were heavily dependent on the interconnected tank systems, which were defunct due to heavy siltation as well as land encroachment, poor land and water management planning in the area. So Janathakshan are currently working in these areas to revive these cascade tank systems, which helps these communities to provide for water for human consumption and agriculture and provide for a sustainable solution to every changing climate, which has become a major challenge for water security and food production. The first set of components of these cascade systems, this is how it works, is designed to improve quality of water entering into the tank from the catchment. Next, before the tank, there is a grass cover located between the catchment area and high flood levels for purifying the water by holding granules of this earth and sediments. The water stored in the tank is protected from evaporation by another layer of a tree belt, which naturally grows on either sides of the uppermost area of these tanks. This acts as a windshield, minimizing dry wind contacting the water surface, minimizing evaporation. Thirdly, a thick strip of vegetation is located between the tank bund and the paddy fields to reach the saline water sipping from the tank, thereby protecting the paddy fields. This system is also recognized by IUCN, which is a very efficient water management system in the world, with water being recycled in each tank without letting it go waste. Each tank in this cascade system adopts geographical and function features to harmonize with the nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivangi. That's great. And if you can stay around for the Q&A at the end, that would be great. So I'd like to bring in now Geraldo Carreiro, who is the Deputy Team Leader and Technical Expert at GCCA+. Geraldo, the floor is yours. Thank you. We can't hear you. Yes, we can now. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Martin. Indeed, I wanted to show some diversity of the projects financed by the Global Climate Change Challenge Alliance, who has, as you rightly said, started in 2007 and supported more than about 90 projects all around the world, especially in LDCs and SIDS. We have seen with the previous presentations, I think it's really interesting to see that finally human activities, our activities, create not only global warming, as we already know, but sometimes the local conditions for degradation and negative impacts, or aggravating the negative impacts of climate change, even sometimes leading to disasters. So solutions cannot come with more great technology and business as usual, or I would say economy as usual, but have to come with a new thinking. Next slide, please. And this is probably, next please, the meaning of the defining principle formulated by the SPREP, the Secretariat of Pacific Regional Environment Program, when preparing a regional analysis on vulnerabilities and costs. And they actually found out through this dialogue that happened regionally that maintaining the value of ecosystems is much, much more costly than restoring, for instance, and that we should value the what is at stake rather than regret or try to recover through great tech what we have lost. And we will see how this defining principle is used right now in the next session. But I would like for you to have this in mind: maintaining healthy functioning ecosystems for as long as possible as a basis for adaptation and sustainable development. We'll come back there in a minute. And the second example I wanted to show was in Timor-Leste, with the next slide, please, where the GCCA made a vulnerability assessment and formulated a project in 2013. And the situation was alarming due to a context of rising poverty. Timor-Leste has the lowest education levels and the highest unemployment rates in the region, high degradation at watershed level. The main sector is agriculture, but it doesn't provide enough for the population. So we have strong food shortages, sometimes up to 4 months a year of food shortages. Effects of climate change include the reduction of production of maize, rice, but also greens and fruits. And so what the Climate Change Alliance supported, next slide please, was then to various options linking people, communities with new economic activities and their environmental surroundings, meaning that the launch of new nurseries, the choice of trees, the restoration, the protection of water resources, income generation activities related to this production and looking forward. So now there could be, now women and young were put aside a little bit by society, could be active again through those livelihood activities, and also think of the future. And again, we'll see on the next session how it has evolved since 2014. Thank you.
Geraldo, that's great, and we look forward to hearing from you again later. But finally, in this section of the session, looking at what works in nature-based solutions, we can turn to Carolina Siqueira. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly there, Carolina. She is the Conservation Program Manager for WWF in Brazil. And Carolina, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So for today, I'd like to present you the example of nature-based solution approach. That is a 4-year project funded by European Union. So, and it's based on landscape management integrated approach. So next slide, please. So you can see that in the Cerrado, it's where the project is applied. It's the most biodiverse savanna in the world. So the average deforestation rate is 100,000 a year. 50% of this landscape is already deforested, and the other part is spreaded remnants of native vegetation with an advanced degradation systems. And keeping understanding, it's urgent because one of the biggest deforestation in the world, and the maintenance of the Cerrado to ecosystem services, water provision, climate regulation, as 2/3 of the carbon charge of the Cerrado it's underground, and for maintaining the traditional life. This is the context where we're applying nature-based solutions on this project that started last year. So next, and the project has one. And the project has different approaches. So the one with social and environmental aspect, one it's connected to restoration of areas. The graded area of Cerrado, it's a big problem. Million hectares of lands are degraded, so emitting carbon. It's sustainably managed. So in our farmlands, we are engaging producers, we are engaging producer associations for managing pasture lands, engaging public building, financial mechanisms, and unlocking payment for ecosystem services. So the ones who are implement better practices. And a second approach, it's connected to communities. It's an non-timber forest supply chains with the communities. As you can see on this picture on the right side, you see the women of the breakers of Babaçu. Babaçu is one native plant collected in the Cerrado. These women are organizing themselves for collecting this product, selling to the market. So enhancing these kinds of non-timber forest chains that are in balance of ecosystem conservation is really powerful tool for maintaining a livelihood and maintaining the system. So we are promoting capability building to market and financial mechanism unlock this economic development communities in the territories. In the last one that I mentioned here in terms of aspect of nature-based about the increasing effect of protected areas. So we have 80% of the Cerrado ecosystem under protected areas, and the fire management is a really important approach because fire is a threat. If the fire management is bad, it's important for ecosystem conservation and managing the biodiversity managing ecosystem. So it's silver bullet in terms of nature solution, but the combination of the farm holders, communities, markets, financial mechanisms that we can put this piece together in landscape for leveraging solutions. Next one, please. And the last part is the governance. So including governance aspects on the landscape, really important to addressing solutions. And we have been supporting the governance platform. So the one that is social environmental observatory and specific of Cerrado. So bringing together different stakeholders to discuss about public and private policy practice for the sustainable land management. The Cerrado Restoration Alliance an experience that bringing together private sector, academy together to leverage Asian arrangements, and it's really important to bring together different stakeholders to create long-term solutions. And also the last one about conversion-free landscapes. So we are addressing conversion-free landscapes, especially soy and cattle supply chain to the private sector, and implementing solutions, a guidance on and clearing chain from the first stage. It's a markets approach addressing these solutions for the landscape. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolina. And just a quick reminder before we move on to the final part of the discussion, that you can post your questions on Slido, and you can follow a bunch of very useful links there for more information on the topics that we've covered so far. And now on to that final area for discussion, which is where we can focus on what nature-based solutions need in terms of policies and financing in order to scale up. What do we really need now for nature-based solutions to take off? I'd like to welcome back Karen Sotomayor-Riu, Senior Advisor on Disaster Risk Reduction at UN Environment. Karen, if you could take the floor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Martin, and hoping that my slides will come back. I had one more slide, which was slide 4, which was the one before that, actually. It seemed to have dropped off before. But anyway, so UNEP is working with the Carroll Institute of Local Administration, which has developed capacities of over 800 local government engineers, elected officials, and local supervisors on how to undertake nature-based solutions works in a more systematic and scientific manner for reducing disaster and climate risks. Some of those include coastal protection, using natural vegetation, water harvesting structures, urban flood mitigation, slope stability using natural vegetation, mountain hazard management, forest fire management, and abandoned quarry restoration. Those are some of the things that are real tangible works that can be undertaken under this large development program for upscaling nature-based solutions. So next slide, please. So UNEP is now developing a similar model at the national level with national actors for upscaling. And then these include, we're completing a study on EcoDRR, or nature-based solution, natural entry points. We also call EcoDRR ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, adapting our training materials to the national level, conducting training of instructors, and really looking into how we can institutionalize at the national level. Next slide, please. So what needs to be put in place now? What we're looking at really is how to document what works and what can be improved for implementing nature-based solutions at large scale into existing development and disaster risk reduction programs. So we start to see this type of change that needs to happen around the world, so that we have these models that can be replicated elsewhere in other similar projects. And with that, I'd like to go to my last slide, which is just a thank you note. And also for learning more, to please take our massive open online course, which you can find. I'll put the URL in the chat at pedder.org/MOOC. So this massive open online course is open to all, and it provides several examples, tangible examples on how you can get involved in nature-based solutions. And with that, I hand back to you, Martin. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen, and I'm sure people are going to want to take advantage of that free online course. It sounds fascinating. We are very squeezed for time, so I'm going to rush on to our next speaker, who is Colonel Ibro Amadou, the Secretary General at the Ministry of Environment in Niger. Unfortunately, Colonel Amadou could not join us live, but we do have a video from him.
By pioneering an innovative agricultural technology called assisted natural regeneration, Niger is giving hope to the world. What has happened there is the regreening of millions of hectares by helping trees regenerate from seeds and root balls, and it can be applied almost anywhere around the planet, including on these hundreds of millions of hectares of heavily degraded former agricultural lands. Assisted regeneration is simple. It works by exploiting what is already in the landscape, usually in the form of shrubs or seeds, and turning those into trees that provide benefits to agricultural systems, including fertility, erosion control, drought buffering, and water cycle buffering.
Niger ambitionne de mettre à l'échelle les importants acquis obtenus en matière de restauration des terres. Dans le cadre de l'initiative africaine de restauration des paysages forestiers, le Niger s'est engagé à restaurer 3,2 millions d'hectares à l'horizon 2030 dans le cadre de cette initiative panafricaine. Du reste, cette cible se trouve bien reflétée dans la planification nationale en matière de restauration. Par ailleurs, pour booster effectivement la mise en œuvre de ces actions de restauration, le gouvernement a amélioré les cadres législatifs en la matière en adoptant en 2020 le décret réglementant la pratique de la régénération naturelle associée au Niger. L'importance de la régénération des terres dans le contexte du défi climatique est bien évidente. Dans beaucoup de localités du Niger, où par exemple la pratique de la régénération naturelle assistée est devenue une réalité, il a été relevé une amélioration des rendements au niveau des champs de culture pluviale. De même, dans beaucoup de cas, la pratique de la régénération naturelle assistée a permis de renforcer la présence de plusieurs espèces forestières alimentaires et médicinales dans les terroirs, fournissant ainsi d'importants compléments alimentaires aux populations, mais aussi procurant des revenus monétaires additionnels à ces populations. Les actions de restauration des terres ont des effets positifs directs dans l'amélioration de l'offre pastorale, sécurisant les pasteurs et contribuant à réduire les conflits entre agriculteurs et éleveurs, par exemple. Aussi, enfin, les actions de restauration des terres, particulièrement celles liées au révertissement à travers la régénération naturelle assistée, constituent un bon moyen de renforcer le potentiel de séquestration des carbones et le potentiel de développement de l'agrobiodiversité dans nos terroirs agricoles.
So thank you to Colonel Amadou from Niger for that insight. And finally, in this section, I'd like to turn welcome back to Geraldo Carrero from GCCA+. Geraldo, over to you.
Thank you very much. I know we are short on time, so I wanted to focus on 3 elements that are really needed when we think of what's next. The first will be a retake of what the SPREP did in the Pacific. So if you remember well, they first put in place defining principles so that countries could work together inside the countries in order to do the let's say national plans on how economic national plans, right? So next slide, please. And in Samoa, they used those defining principles in terms of putting nature-based solutions, working with nature inside of their policies and plans. So how to me, it explains, and as you can see in the slides, the different, they use the different cross-cutting issues in order to define the visions, in order to base the geographic planning and economic planning according to the vulnerabilities that they have identified. Because most often you have vulnerability studies, you have the economics, the social side, let's say, and you have the economic side, and you have the environmental side, and they all sit in different places. And so, in order to put really nature in the DNA of policies and plans, you need discussion. And this discussion needs to be then translated in something more concrete. On the next slide, I want to go back to Timor-Leste. About 7 years later, also in Timor-Leste, the success of sustainable ecosystem management was really linked to the participation of people at local level, as you can see in the picture, talking about what to do and where and who would manage, certainly involving the young and women. And the picture below, they are doing a traditional session in order to start dialogue between the members of the communities. It's called Tarabadu. And it's mostly about defining and using the incentives so that the young, the women, the other generations, other people can participate and can build something new together. So the idea of a second phase of the GCCA project was to develop a national carbon market mechanism where the communities who pay more attention to their nurseries and forests will actually have additional benefits. So that's a deal that is done between the communities themselves and this national carbon mechanism system that is being put in place right now. The system and the project also supports the institutionalization of the mechanism, like how to certify results, how to monitor the results, and how to lead everything to payments. A third example, I couldn't leave without this, and this is the next slide, please. It's about finance, and the best finance is at home. And so I wanted to finish this with an example in Cambodia, where the GCCA also supported the authorities to define how climate was into the budget. So this has been done developed for quite a long time now. And from climate public expenditure and institutional review, then climate sector action plans, then the finance of what is needed, defining what is needed, what is the ambition for the future in each of the sectors. And this now even led to a discussion with the NGO. These figures come from the NGO Forum, an exercise that NGOs, local NGOs did to understand the budget and how climate action was included in the budget and which sectors should maybe be more benefiting for future climate action.
Thank you, Geraldo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great. So we are extremely tight for time. So I want to go straight now to the results of the polls that we carried out earlier. So is it possible for us to see the results of the first poll? Here we go, which asked the question, which areas for nature-based solutions can they have the most potential? Let's have a look at some of the results. Okay, so that's fairly clear, I would say. Replacing grey infrastructure, reducing both costs and environmental degradation. So a fairly clear winner on that poll. And if we can have a look at the second poll, which asked what the priorities for nature-based solutions should be today. If we can have a look at that one. Here we go. And again, grey infrastructure heading the list there. So replacement of grey infrastructure with nature-based solutions. So a fairly clear consensus there, I think. I'm sorry to rush through that, but you will be able to have a look at the results of the polls in more detail on the GCCA website, I believe, or on the event website. But now time to take a look at some of your questions. I hope our participants have been able to stay with us. I have a question here which is about private sector finance. Now, Geraldo, you mentioned this just now, but I'd be interested to hear what maybe some of the other participants have their view on that. What role can private sector finance play in getting nature-based solutions implemented? Lee Winowicki from World Agroforestry, are you still with us? Would you like to offer your opinion on that very quickly?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think right now we need to be talking about public and private sector finance and really making sure that we have transparent and equitable financial mechanisms that reach the smallholders. Remember, it's about implementation on the ground. And just to link it to my presentation, I think that by having the systematic data sets that allow us to track progress on the ground, this will be a real game changer in terms of encouraging investments, de-risking investments. And my final point is that by having engagement of the land users, the farmers, the implementers on the ground engaged in the monitoring process, this will really take us further in terms of investments reaching smallholders. Thank you.
You, Carolina in Brazil, I don't know if you can, in just 30 seconds, give us your ideas on how private sector finance can help to ramp up some of these solutions. Maybe Carolina is no longer with us.
Yeah, I'm here. I just need the host to allow my video. I think the private sector financial solutions are important on clearing the supply chains for forestation, so in solution of traceability, transparency, and financing of ecosystem services and solutions that really conserve the ecosystem for the long term. Thank you.
Okay, Carolina, that's great. Thank you very much. Your line isn't brilliant, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm really sorry that we have only literally got round to one question, very tight for time. I must give Carla Montesi from DG INTPA time to sum up a bit about what we've heard today. Carla.
Many thanks, Martin, but I think all the interventions were very clear, and I would like to take this moment just to thank all the partners that were doing this presentation, because they have really demonstrated and they use some concrete project initiatives that are ongoing, financed by the European Union from the GCCA Plus program to the Greening Africa Hub to the contribution to the Green Wall. So all concrete examples that are demonstrating the benefit of nature-based solution. So as Karen was saying from UNEP, clearly now we need to scale up, and she has brilliantly demonstrated how we can progress to scale up. Looking also to the question from the private sector, allow me to say that I would like to support the answer already given, that it's very, very important where we are mentioning all these subjects, we are focusing to the public, but also to the private sector, because the private sector can play a very important role. And also looking to our action as EU, I can say that in the next future, we are implementing around the world some initiatives, some new financial instrument that will allow also to de-risk investment from the private sector. So allow also the private sector intervene in all these key domains. So many thanks. It's clearly we need now to scale up, and as soon as we do, the best is to face the challenges that we have in front of us. Many thanks, Martin.
Carla Montesi, thank you so much for that. Very quickly, I have time to mention the winners of the EU GCCA Plus Youth Awards. I'm afraid I don't have time to go through them all in detail now. We're going to put a slide up, but please go to the GCCA website for more details about the Youth Awards, which were absolutely fantastic. Congratulations to those 5 winners. And I'm afraid we're out of time, so thank you to all of you for joining us and to all our speakers. Thank you very much indeed. you.